Let me share a secret with you how you can train a dog without actually spending time on training the dog. Because the biggest pet peeve of every dog trainer that when you give homework to your clients, they don't really do it because they don't have time. So in this video, I'm going to share you several strategies when you don't need much time or no time at all. You don't need to schedule a training session. You don't need to dedicate a lot of time to it. You don't need to have lots of effort, but you can still train your dog. Okay, tip number one. First, you have to understand that whatever behavior is reinforced, this behavior will repeat in future. So if the dog does something and gets reward for this on a regular basis, the dog will be motivated to repeat this behavior. This is actually how dogs train us. For example, if your dog barks at you every time you give them food, the way how it probably started, the dog barked at you, you gave them the treat, the dog learned that, oh, I should bark in order to get treat. And if I bark louder, you're probably going to move faster and get the treat faster. So the same way how dogs can train us, we can train them. For this method, you will need a jar with 50 treats. It doesn't need to be treats. It can be actually your dog food. If your dog is food motivated, don't even bother with treats. Just put 50 kibble in your jar. If your dog doesn't get very excited about kibble, then you can have some treats and cut them in tiny pieces. You can even buy training treats and cut them in half or in 4 pieces, depends on the size of your dog, because you want to stretch the amount of treats. So you will only have like a small handful of treats that's going to last you a lot. You're going to prepare this jar every day. Have this treat somewhere where you can easily reach for it. And then you also have to decide like what things you want to reward or reinforce. For example, I know that when my dog is outside, they don't really come to me when I call them. Okay, let's work on recall. So during the day, I just randomly gonna call my dog. They're gonna come to me. I'm gonna give them a treat from a jar and let them go do whatever they were doing. And I'm gonna repeat it many, many times. Ideally, if you can use all the 50 treats. You will notice how after several days of this exercise, the dog comes like this. First, you start it at home when the dog is close to you, and then you can start to be more challenging. You can go to the different room, call your dog, they come to you, give them a treat. It's important to reward every time they come, so they know that, oh, every time I go there, something good happens to me. Eventually, you can even bring this jar on a walk. Let's say you walk your dog on a leash, the dog is sniffing something on the ground, you say their name, ask them to come to you, give them a treat.
Frankie, yes, good boy.
Let's see if he's going to notice the dog and if you can actually call him.
Does his buddy too?
Yes. Or let's say your dog is very high energy and they don't relax much. You can reinforce the calm using the same method. Every time your dog is just laying down, just relaxing, not bothering you, not bugging anyone, you just gently pass by and place a treat in front of them. Most probably the first time you try this type of exercise, the dog gonna get extremely excited about the treats and starts following you. Don't worry about that. You don't need to do anything about it. You just give your treat and then you ignore the dog for the next 30 minutes or as long as you need. As soon as they go back to doing whatever, you wait again, find a moment when they're doing something you want them to do, you give them a treat. In order for this to work, you have to have a good history of reinforcement. That means you have a regular rewards that the dog gets for particular behavior to the point when behavior becomes automatic or very quick. Like, for example, quick recall. If you get a jar, prepare 50 treats, maybe do 5 repetitions, give your dog 5 treats and forget about it completely, it will not stick. But the magic about this training that although you have to do something, it doesn't require much time from you. For example, let's say you work from home, your jar is in the kitchen, every time you go to, pour a glass of water or make tea, call your dog to you or ask your dog to do something, give them a treat, that's it. And especially this method is effective with puppies and younger dogs because they learn really quick. What are the things you can reinforce? Let's say your dog is playing with their toys on their own. You want to reward them. Just pass by, drop a treat. This way you teach the dog to, be self-sufficient, playing with their own toys. If your dog is chewing something, what they were supposed to chew on, like their toy or a treat, go and reward them. This way you reinforce them for playing with their toys instead of playing with your furniture. You take your dog potty, reward them every time they go. You take your dog for a walk, and let's say usually the dog doesn't pay much attention to you at the walk. Take this jar with you. Every time they voluntarily come back to you to check in with you, give them a treat. If they only come 1 time, it's okay. You give them 1 treat today, maybe tomorrow they come 2 times, and in a week they're gonna come 50 times. So the more reinforcement your dog gets for this behavior, the more likely they're gonna repeat this behavior. 1 time doesn't work, 1 treat doesn't work, but a series of reinforcement over several days, several weeks does magic. And you don't even need to actively train anything. You just reward the good behaviors. Second one, this one doesn't even involve treats for those people who are extremely afraid to reward their dog with anything. This is how like parents usually teach their kids to do something. For example, as a parent, you can say, hey, you can go, play outside, or I don't know, play computer games, but first you need to wash the dishes or something like that. So in order to get something pleasant, the person has to do something less pleasant. Eventually the kid learns, okay, every time I want to go play outside, I need first to clean my room or something like that. The cool part that we can use the same method with dogs. For example, my dog doesn't usually come to me when I call them outside. As soon as I'm outside on a walk, the dog forgets about me. I can actually practice the dog listen to me by giving them something better in return. This is how it works. Let's say I have my dog, and let me put a leash on my dog. Okay, this is my doggy on a leash, and as soon as we get out of the house, my dog wants to go somewhere. And let's say at some point we reach some field or some, I don't know, dog park where I can actually unleash my dog. Every time before unleashing the leash, I'm gonna say my dog's name. It's like, hey, doggy. The dog is like, what? Okay, now I can unleash you. So this way we reinforce looking at us, because if the dog looks at us, they get what they want. They're gonna go play with their buddies in a dog park. And slowly I will increase the requirement. At some point, when the dog looks at me, I'm like, that's not enough. Come here. The dog is like, okay, hello. Then I'm gonna unleash you. So it's very simple training. It doesn't look like much, but what your dog gonna learn that in order to be unleashed, you have to come back to you. So this way, coming to you becomes not like a chore, like, oh my God. Because usually, we only call our dog outside when we try to put them on a leash and go home. So this way, the dog learns like, wait a minute. When I come to my pet parent, it doesn't mean the fun is over. It actually means the fun is starting. And the same how a kid might be much faster cleaning the dishes because he wants to go outside. The same, the dog will be much more motivated to come to us. I can even ask my dog to do other things. For example, my dog gets very excited before like saying hi to another dog. So I can actually ask my dog to come to me, sit down, give me like a couple of seconds of like calm, then you can say go hi. So this way you can actually train the dog to be very polite when meeting other people or other dogs. What else I can do? For example, every time I open the front door, my dog that just storms out. In some cases it can be even dangerous, because what if there is like something outside, or maybe you live in a house or an apartment that has like, and your dog is just storming down the stairs and dragging you, behind. We definitely don't want that. So what I can do, I can start doing little training with the door. So I'm gonna ask my dog to sit in front of the door, and I'm gonna start slowly opening the door. If my dog gets up and starts like pushing through the door, I'm gonna close the door again and ask again to sit. The dog gonna learn like, oh, every time I get up, the door closes back, so I just need to sit. This way I can build this exercise all the way until the point that my dog is sitting and actually even able to sit or stand in front of the open door without, running out. I don't need to spend much time. I can just have it as a rule. Like every time I take the dog for a walk, if they like getting super like excited and stormy, I just ask them to sit. As soon as they sit, I open the door. If they don't sit, I don't open the door. So this the way the dog learns super awesome, super useful automatic default behavior. See the door, sit down and wait until, you're invited to cross the threshold. I can do the same with food. Let's say I have a football. My dog is like excited, jumping. I'm slowly lowering the football. If my dog is jumping, I lift it up. As soon as as dog is sitting, as soon as I could lower it to the floor and dog didn't jump, I said like, okay, now you can eat it. So I am asking the dog for a particular behavior that I want them to do, and in return, they get what they want. The only thing you have to understand about this method that you have to be reasonable what you ask your dog for in the very beginning. So you start with something small, and every day you can ask for a little bit more. For example, if you take your dog out and your dog tends to go like absolutely crazy about the walk, so as soon as you say let's go for a walk, or as soon as you grab the leash, the dog starts like running in circles, like whining, crying, barking, running on the ceiling. Of course you can't expect this dog to be sitting nicely in front of the door. Maybe at this point you just ask the dog like something very simple what they can actually do, and then you immediately open the door. Next time you ask a little bit more, and so on. Third one, how else you can train a dog without spending much time training them. If you're the person who does lots of playtime with dog, maybe you play tag, maybe you play fetch, maybe, you like wrestle together, whatnot, you can actually sneak in training during play. So let's say you're playing fetch. You can ask your dog to sit, and only when they sit, you toss the ball. If the dog is jumping, you're not going to do anything. You're going to ask the dog to sit again. As soon as they sit, you're going to toss the ball. If they're not sitting, if they're jumping on you, if they're barking, you're not tossing it. As soon as your dog learns how to sit, you can start sneaking in other things. You can, for example, teach your dog how to do stay. So you say stay, you step back, toss a toy. Next time you maybe step back 2 steps, 3 steps, 5 steps, and stuff like this. So you're slowly teaching your dog to wait for things, to stay in place, and the dog learns like, oh, in order for me to get my toy, I have to do these things. You can even train recall. When you ask your dog to stay somewhere, you step back, then you call your dog to come to you. They run to you because they know that as soon as they get there, they're going to play. And then you offer tug or you often fetch and stuff like this. Usually in the very beginning, it might be a little bit hard for you to figure out how to do these things. But if you understand this principle, you can teach your dog so many things. And again, you don't need treats. You can just use playtime as a reward. Because when we talk about positive reinforcement training, we're talking about, rewarding the dog with something they want. It's not always treats, and sometimes the dog doesn't want treats. There are dogs who would much prefer to be rewarded with playtime. So instead of doing free playtime, you can just use that as a reward for teaching certain behaviors, and you have fun and training in the same time. And last but not least, you can actually train your dog during walks. Lots of people say like, I don't have time to train the dog, but most of us, we take our dog out at least twice a day, at least for 15-20 minutes. So think of it. Every time you go for a walk with your dog, you can actually spare some of the walking time and do whatever training you need to be doing, especially if you're working with a trainer. Most people have a misconception. They think the walk with a dog means that we are going from A to B with the constant pace, and that's how we need to do it. That's how the dog expects the walk to happen. But this is not quite true. You can, walk them for 10 minutes, then you can find some quiet area and you can do the training. You can either do play and train, or you can use treats, or you can use, as I said, the method when you ask the dog to do something and then they let them play, and then they call them back to you, ask them to do something else, and then they release to play again. So you can incorporate it in a walk, and most dogs would enjoy this walk much better, especially if you walk them in the same neighborhood every day. Most of the time, adding other stuff will actually spice up the walk. You're not just physically exhausting your dog. And to be honest, most young dogs are not physically exhausted by a 20-30 minute walk, but you're actually mentally exhausting them, because doing training or doing any impulse control, waiting for something, performing certain behaviors requires so much from a dog that they're going to be much more better exhausted after such a walk when you do walk and train than a regular walk. In my experience, when I take certain clients for a training walks, and usually those walks 45 minutes, most people say oh my God, 45 minutes is not enough for my dog. But in my experience, most of my client dogs, when they come home, they just pass out completely, because we do so much training, so much mental stimulation. We do a proper sniff walks, we do playtime, we do other things. So 45 minutes was way more than they can handle. So it's actually a good thing. You can have shorter walks, but more intensive, especially if the weather is bad or if your dog doesn't go for longer walks.
Sunlight